I'm going to start by asking you to please tell us, what is this book all about?
Good question. Yeah, I think it's not a book I would have imagined writing 5 years ago, actually. It's been quite a journey. I think so many people feel they have to fit into the dichotomy of either you believe in the God of traditional Western religion, or you're a secular atheist. It's like, whose side are you on, Richard Dawkins or the Pope? Make your mind up. I was raised Catholic, but decided when I was about 14 I didn't believe in God, didn't get confirmed, upset my grandmother, and was quite happily in team secular atheist for many, many years. But I guess just recently, over a period of maybe 5 years or so, I've just come to think that actually both of these worldviews are inadequate. Both of them have things they can't explain about reality. And that's how I eventually came to this book. So what I try to do is try to raise the difficulties for both belief in the God of traditional Western religion, but also to the secular atheist idea that we're in a meaningless, purposeless universe. And ultimately where I think the evidence points is to what I call cosmic purpose, or some kind of goal-directedness at the fundamental level of reality, but in the absence of the God of traditional Western religion. So that's the argument of the book, and then I explore also its connections to human meaning and purpose.
So the idea is to chart a middle ground between hardcore atheism on the one hand and traditional religion on the other.
Yeah, or tradition. I suppose belief in the God of traditional Western religion, the Abrahamic God, what philosophers sometimes call the omni-God, all-knowing, all-powerful, perfectly good. So, not necessarily talking about the God of other religions or Eastern religions, or that might be. So when I talk about this dichotomy, maybe it's a sort of dichotomy in Western intellectual circles that might not be so pervasive more globally.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand over to Jack.
Yeah, do you want to begin perhaps by telling us why you reject the atheistic model of the universe? Maybe one without an ultimate cosmic purpose, in which things are just here by chance and through pure coincidence. That kind of atheistic worldview without the need for a cosmic design or something fundamental there guiding the values of existence.
Yeah, so I focus on a couple of things, but one thing I focus on is the fine-tuning of physics for life. This is a surprising discovery of recent decades that for life to be possible, certain numbers in physics had to be just right or fall in a certain narrow range. So the example that's perhaps most perplexed cosmologists revolves around dark energy, the force that propels the accelerating expansion of the universe. So in 1998, we discovered that our universe is not only expanding, but accelerating in its expansion. And so physicists postulate a repulsive force that's pushing everything apart that we call dark energy. And once you do the calculations, it becomes clear that if that force had been a little bit stronger, everything would have shot apart so quickly that no two particles would have ever met. We wouldn't have had stars or planets or any kind of structural complexity, and therefore no life. Whereas if that force had been significantly weaker, the universe would have, so the force then wouldn't have counteracted gravity if it was weaker. So the universe would have collapsed back on itself in a split second. And we wouldn't have had, again, stars, planets, life. So for life to be possible, the strength of that force had to be like Goldilocks porridge, just right, not too strong, not too weak. And that's just one example. There are many numbers like that. So fundamentally, I think we face a choice. Either these numbers in our physics just happen against incredible odds to be right for life, and I think that's sort of too improbable to take seriously, or these numbers in our physics are as they are because they are the right numbers for life. In other words, that there is some kind of directedness towards reality at the fundamental level in this very early stage of the universe. And that's weird and unexpected, but we should just put our biases on one side, both religious and secular biases, and just try and follow the evidence where it leads.
Well, let me push the atheist point of view for a moment here. You give lots of good examples in the book. There's like 30 of these fundamental laws of nature that are all exquisitely balanced, that without any of them, the world wouldn't come to be as it is. Like you say, gravity wasn't strong enough, the planets wouldn't come together. If it was a little bit weaker, then they would be floating off in space somewhere. Right? And you give a bunch of examples in the book, and you end up doing something like what you said there. In the light of this, we face a theoretical choice between just saying that it just happens to be chance and saying that there's some kind of purpose behind these fundamental laws being the way they are. Now, the popular theoretical physicist Lawrence Krauss says in his book, A Universe from Nothing, he says there are these fundamental laws of nature, and they could have been any values. And that's just how lucky we are to be here. That all these 30 fundamental laws of nature, the universe rolled the dice, and they just happen to be the way they are. And we should just accept that our luck is the brute fact. So let me push you on this question. Why should we accept the view that the laws of nature are deliberately fine-tuned for the existence of intelligent life over the view by someone like Krauss's that the fundamental laws of nature aren't deliberately chosen in that same way?
Good. I mean, I think if things are a little bit improbable, we're happy to take it as just chance or just coincidence. I talk in my book about Jesus in toast. If you Google, where you sometimes get a burn mark in the toast that's strikingly, uncannily similar to the image of Jesus, or I guess Jesus in Western art and stuff. But not to like a little bit improbable. They would have exactly that shape, but it's not that improbable, and so we're happy to just be entertained by it. But I think when things pass a certain level of improbability, I think that's no longer a rational option. So I mean, to take an analogy, suppose bank robbers break into a bank and let's say we know they get the number of the 10-digit number of the safe right first time. Okay, here's two hypotheses. One, they had inside information and they were told the number. Two, they just guessed it and just happened to get it right. I mean, nobody would accept that latter because it's just too improbable. And so, so similar, likewise, I think, there's two hypotheses here. Yeah, either, and I think, we can make sense, ways we might get to of there being some kind of directedness towards life. Hypothesis 2, it was just chance. And I think it's just too improbable to take seriously. Sometimes find people on Twitter sort of think it's brave. I don't mind the improbability. But it's not brave, it's irrational. So if something gets so improbable, you should, I think we know quite a bit about how probabilistic reasoning works, and, we try not to have improbable beliefs.
Well, another way the theoretical physicists tried to solve this problem is, like the multiverse objection. So you might think we've got independent evidence for thinking that we exist as one of a great number of universes that actually exist. Something about, this goes above my pay grade, but something like the inflation model of the universe begins with a period of rapid expansion and slows down, and eventually we get lots of other smaller universes, or universes as big as ours, in which the fundamental laws of nature are slightly different. So there are perhaps an infinite, if not an enormous number of these other universes where gravity was too weak or too strong. And so, because our universe isn't prioritized and we're just one of a great many, there's no reason why we should think our universe rather than some other universe is fine-tuned for the existence of life. So there's no problem there, says the theoretical physicist, because there are universes that aren't finely tuned, and it is just chance that we happen to find ourselves in this one. Is this a better response out of the two?
I think this is a very important response, yes, and this is what I used to accept. Right, I've always thought fine-tuning needed explaining, but I thought the multiverse seemed the more plausible explanation. I don't want to be arguing for cosmic purpose, it sounds a bit silly. But I was persuaded by philosophers of probability that there is some dodgy reasoning going on in the inference from fine-tuning to a multiverse, that it commits what's called the inverse gambler's fallacy. I didn't expect that response. Got much train of thought. So it's a big debate here, but here's the basic. This objection, this particular objection to the multiverse account of fine-tuning, has been in the academic literature for decades. But in a typical example of philosophers talking to themselves, nobody knows about it, despite there's huge interest in, from religious people arguing for God with fine-tuning, or certain physicists arguing for the multiverse. Nobody knows about this objection. And nobody's connected it to the science, actually, the contemporary scientific discussions of the multiverse. So I'm quite excited in the book to try and connect this up to the scientific discussions of the multiverse and also get it out to a broader audience. Anyway, but just to give the basic idea, suppose, Jack, you and I go to a casino later tonight, as we all want to do. And are there any casinos in Durham? Anyway, sorry, I didn't prep you on that question. Right, and I say we walk into a small room as we go into the casino, and there's just one person in the room and having an incredible run of luck at roulette. They win and win and win and win, having this incredible run of luck. And I turn to you and say, "Wow, there must be loads of people in the casino tonight." And you say to me, "Philip, what are you talking about? We've just seen this one guy. What's that got to do with other people in the casino?" And I say, well, if there's tens of thousands of people playing roulette in the casino, it's not so surprising that someone's going to have an incredible run of luck. And that's what we've observed. Someone's had an incredible run of luck. So everyone agrees that's a fallacy. That's fallacious reasoning, because our observational evidence just concerns this particular individual who's had a great run of luck. And no matter how many people there are or aren't elsewhere in a casino, it has no bearing on how likely it is that this one person, this particular person, would have an incredible run of luck. Everyone agrees that's a mistake, but the reasoning, I would say, is relevantly similar to that of the multiverse theorists. So these physicists think, oh my God, the numbers are right for life against incredible odds. There must be loads of other universes out there with terrible numbers. But that's the same form of reasoning, right? Seeing this one person, all we've observed is this one universe. That's what we need explaining. No matter how many other universes there are out there, it has no bearing on how likely it is that our universe will be fine-tuned for life. It's just like trying to explain this one guy we've observed having a great run of luck in terms of people elsewhere in the casino. So I was kind of dragged kicking and screaming into thinking that's not an option, and we have to turn to these more radical options, even though they feel a bit weird. And I know people on Twitter saying Bertrand Russell would have believed in cosmic purpose because he followed the evidence where it led, and the evidence wasn't there then. But it's there now, and we've just got to face up to it.
As a Russell scholar, I also sincerely doubt he would have followed the evidence there.
Oh shit, I forgot about that. I should have raised this with you something.
Alright.
Get rid of that.
What I will do now, and having heard a bit more about why you reject extreme atheism, I'm going to press you as to why you reject the God of classical Western Christian theism, the omni-God. So I believe it has something to do with the problem of evil. So what problem do you think evil poses to the existence of that God?
Yeah, so this is the familiar challenge of reconciling the existence of an all-powerful, loving God with the terrible, gratuitous suffering we find in the world. And don't get me wrong, the world is a lovely place as well in lots of ways. But, every time we turn on the news, there's just unbearable suffering. And if the creator of our universe, could have done anything, absolutely anything, I guess it doesn't seem plausible to me that this is what they've come up with. As nice as it is in certain respects, there's also seems so much arbitrariness and suffering. So,
taking the side of the theist for a moment, so one of the classic defences of evil from a Christian perspective is the idea that, sure, humans commit moral evil all the time. We do dreadful things to each other. There's currently far more evidence than we want of that in the news right now. But the defense is, well, God created us to be free. And if we're free, then we're free to do really awful things as well as good things. And a lot of people think that does indeed account for the existence of moral evil in the world. What would you say to that?
Yeah, it's an important response, and I think that can maybe get us some of the way with perhaps some of the suffering caused by human beings. I think where the problem of evil becomes most acute is with the terrible suffering we just find in the natural, all over the place in the natural world. Actually, people might be worth saying that the word evil is used in a bit of a weird way in this context, just to mean bad things, regardless of whether people do them or not. You don't tend to think of a hurricane as evil, but in this kind of discussion, So, I mean, why would a loving God, again, who could do anything, choose to create us through such a horrific, long-winded process like evolution by natural selection? Or why would a loving God create the North American long-tailed shrew that paralyzes its prey and then eats it alive over several days before it dies from its wounds?
So,
Are you laughing?
No,
it's terrible.
It is terrible.
I'm joking. I always laugh when I say it. I don't know why. It's horrible. But so that kind of makes no sense to me.
So some theists would say that these kinds of natural evils, there's a terrible flood, there's a terrible flesh-eating shrew, that it gives us all an opportunity to exercise moral virtues. I am courageous in the face of the hurricane. I help my friend away from the paralysing flesh-eating shrew. And it gives me a chance to grow as a person. The veil of soul-making.
Yes.
How would you respond to that?
Yeah, and a lot of the book focuses on the response to this problem by the distinguished Christian philosopher Richard Swinburne, who eventually reviewed it for the Times Literary Supplement, which is going to come out early December, I think, and we've had a debate on it, which is on the Unbelievable podcast, which is going to come up at some point. But yeah, what I like about Richard Swinburne's work is he distinguishes the issue of, are there certain goods that can only come about in a world of natural evil, with natural disasters and so on, from the question of, would a creator have the right to kill and maim in order to bring about those goods? I really like that he makes that distinction, and that's really where I take issue with this. So, I mean, perhaps to make that clearer, there's a classic objection to utilitarian moral philosophies, at least of a very simple kind. So utilitarians say morality is all about getting the greatest happiness for the greatest number, very roughly, like Dr. Spock said. No, it's not. It's Mr. Spock, isn't it? My colleague always corrects me.
Whether or not he's a utilitarian, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but
sorry.
the title is correct.
Yes. Anyway, but so classic objection is, thought experiment. Suppose a doctor could murder one innocent patient and then save 5 unwell patients, giving the heart to one, the kidneys to another, and so on. And let's say, somehow no one's going to find out about this. And, that doctor would have increased well-being, 5 people, 5 lives saved at the cost of 1. But most of us think, even so, that's still wrong because that person has a right to life and the doctor infringes it by murdering them. Likewise, I think even if we concede to Richard Swinburne that there are some great goods that come about from natural disasters, the ability to show courage, serious moral choices, compassion, I still think it would be immoral for a creator to violate our people's right to life and security through killing them, which I think is what a creator does if she allows, hurricanes and the shrew and so on. You're obsessed with the shrew.
I mean, it's a good example.
It is. It's not my example actually, but yeah. Can't remember whose it is. But yeah.
Can I give a follow-up question on the problem of
Sure.
stuff? So there's a couple of things there that are interesting that I'd like your thoughts on. The first is you said something like, the theist thinks that God can do anything, so why do this? And typically the theist doesn't think that God can do everything, that God can just do what's logically possible, just to begin with.
Yeah.
Point. But the point which I think is more serious is in your book, and I think it's my favourite chapter of the book, and you do a really good job of taking Swinburne's argument head on, showing that the problem of evil is a bigger problem for him than perhaps he thinks. You focus just on Swinburne and a type of defence he gives, which is a theodicy. Now, those who know, like, theodicies are just theories in defence of God in response to the problem of evil, and traditionally they've tried to tell us God's reasons for actually allowing evil to exist. But most philosophers of religion these days don't try and offer what is quite an arrogant explanation of knowing God's mind and why God allows for evil, but offer defences instead. So try to show, as if God was in the court of law, that it's not beyond all reasonable doubts that God is guilty of allowing evil to exist. And so out of that, first of all, I wonder if you think that the free will defence is better than the free will theodicy. And the second question, and again to broaden it beyond just Richard Swinburne, and to emphasise the point, I think you do a great job of responding to Swinburne, but even Alvin Plantinga, probably the biggest and best philosopher of religion in the world, he is famous for the free will defence, famous for developing the view, and even he doesn't think the free will defence is sufficient for dealing with the problem of evil, and offers a bunch of other solutions. So the first question is something like, are defences better than theodicies? Would it change your argument in the book? And the second question is something like, do you have any thoughts on some of the other defences to God's goodness? Like, perhaps this is all a test and we get like redemption in the end, and it's part of a wider story.
Yeah, defences, theodicy. So the way I structure it, which is maybe a little bit original, that generally things are set up, I don't know how much to go into the techie details here, but generally people distinguish the logical problem of evil, like you're trying to show God's existence is logically incompatible with the suffering we find, or the evidential argument, where the suffering is taken to be evidence against God, and that's normally construed as a kind of inductive inference, such as you find in science more generally. What I try to argue is for what I call the cosmic sin intuition, which is that the intuition that it would be immoral for an all-powerful being to create a universe like this, and that does logically entail, I think, the non-existence of the omnigod. But still, that moral intuition is fallible. It's fallible. It's not. So it's not logically certain that that's true. But I want to say it's a pretty damn solid moral intuition. I think that we, through reflecting on various types of possible reasons God might have allowed suffering, I think they just don't seem to cut it. And so it's our best, we've got pretty good reason to be confident about that. Obviously, I don't, in the book, cover all possible responses to this argument, but another one I consider is the skeptical theist response. Skeptical theist trying to say, yeah, and Alvin Plantinga's at some points adopted this, So yeah, we've absolutely no idea what God's reasons are for allowing suffering, but God's God and we're us, and God's so much greater than us, we wouldn't expect to know God's reasons for doing what she does. And there it's a long discussion of that, but one thing I make an analogy to dark matter, whereas, what is it, 90%, 95% of the universe is dark matter or dark energy that we don't really understand. It could be that if you knew about the full nature of the dark matter and dark energy, that would radically transform our theories, not just of that, but of the matter we do know about, because maybe you'd have a more unified theory to explain both. But nobody thinks, we can't do physics. All you can do is work with the evidence we currently have. So I think all we can do is try to have our best guess at whether that is a sound moral intuition, a cosmic sin intuition, that it would be wrong for an all-powerful being to create a universe like this. And I think reflection on theodicies and so on does give us confidence that is true. And that's all you can ever do, is have your best guess.
Okay.
It's a good motto for philosophy.
Absolutely, have your best guess.
So we've heard why you reject full-on atheism and why you reject God as classically conceived by Western Christianity. Where do you think we should go from there? What is the kind of middle path that you're trying to chart?
So that's the structure of the book, really. the believer in the traditional God can't explain suffering. The atheist, the typical atheist, meaningless, purposeless universe can't explain fine-tuning and some other stuff to do with the evolution of consciousness that we haven't had time to go into here. So what we need to do is find a hypothesis that can account for both. And I consider basically 3 different possibilities. So maybe the simplest, most straightforward way of trying to do this is to sort of tweak the properties of God a bit. So maybe our creator is bad or amoral, or maybe our creator has limited abilities. Maybe she's made the best universe she can. It's like, I know it's going to be messy. I'm sorry about the shrews, but this is just wondering how long-winded to go. This is the best I can do. I'm sorry. Is this or nothing? Or maybe the simulation hypothesis that we are associated with Nick Bostrom, that we're in a computer simulation. Maybe our creator is some random software engineer trying to, try out some experiments. So that's one option, a sort of non-standard designer. But it's not obvious, actually, that you need a conscious mind to undergird cosmic purpose. The philosopher Thomas Nagel has developed in great detail a theory of teleological laws of nature with goals built into them. So maybe there's just a sort of impersonal tendency of the universe towards life, a tendency that interacts with the laws of physics in ways we don't yet fully understand. So that's the second option, sort of these goal-directed laws of nature. But the third option, and the one that connects most with my previous work, like my book Galileo's Error, is cosmopsychism, the hypothesis that the universe itself is a conscious mind with its own goals, which I try to show is not as bizarre and extravagant as it might first seem. But yeah, so those 3 options I consider. I think that's probably the third option I try to suggest is probably has the edge, because it's it gives us a deeper explanation of cosmic purpose, but it doesn't postulate a kind of supernatural designer. It just says the universe itself is a conscious mind. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. So before we get into the audience Q&A, just a final question from us then. The subtitle of the book is The Purpose of the Universe. So do you think that one of these non-standard hypotheses, ways of thinking about how our world came to be the way it is, has any interesting implications for how we should be living our lives here and now?
Good question. So most of the book is just a kind of cold-blooded, philosophical, scientific case that we should take this cosmic purpose idea seriously. And you could, my colleague David Ferracci, who's not here tonight,
We'd hear if he was.
What?
We'd hear if he was.
I thought you said he'd be here if he was. It's a bit of a tautology, Emily.
Just loud.
Yes, he is. Booming voice. Anyway, I love David. Sorry, it sounds like we're really slagging off David. No. Anyway, what was the question? Oh yeah, so I remember talking to him about some of this fine-tuning stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, you got a point there, but I don't care. It doesn't affect my life." So a lot of the book you could take in that way, but the first and last chapters, I try to think about the implications for human meaning and purpose. And I sort of connect it to thinking about spiritual practice and community and political struggle as well. But so overall, I have a sort of middle way. It's always the middle ways with me. So on one extreme, you've got the Christian philosopher William Lane Craig, who argues that if there's no purpose to the universe, it's all pointless. He even says we might as well just rape and kill each other if we want to. Not just religious philosophers, the atheist, anti-natalist philosopher David Benatar also suggests life is so meaningless that it's immoral to have children. We should let the human race pass out of existence. Anyway, that's one extreme. The other extreme is a more familiar secular atheist position, maybe what David Ferracci I just mentioned has, that probably there isn't cosmic purpose. But even if there is, it's irrelevant. We make our own purpose. So I have a middle way option. I think you can have a perfectly meaningful life without thinking about cosmic purpose. If you I'm not quite a subjectivist about this. I don't think it's just. Well, maybe I don't need to go into that. I've talked long enough. But I suffice to say, I think you can have a meaningful life pursuing things that are worth doing, like creativity, kindness, love, the pursuit of knowledge. I like to think I had some kind of meaningful life before I started thinking about this cosmic purpose stuff. Nonetheless, if there is cosmic purpose or reason to take that idea seriously, then I think potentially our lives could be more meaningful, right? I think we want our lives to make a difference. If you can, in some small way, contribute to the purposes of the whole of reality, that's like huge. That's like as big a difference as you can imagine making. So maybe there's scope for a more meaningful life. But, I don't want to be too dogmatic about this. I suppose what I'm interested to do in the book is consider possibilities that not the familiar ones of traditional religion or secular atheism, and consider this view, cosmic purposivism, of conceiving of your life in the hope of some kind of cosmic purpose. And maybe it might be for you, or maybe not.